In this video, I'm going to talk about methods I've used in previous MMOs to make gold, and talk about whether these same methods might apply to this MMO. I do want to note, as I have in many previous videos, that this is not a game that becoming economically dominant in will likely be attainable as a solo player. The best way to optimize your gold making methods will likely be by participating in an organized guild. I considered showing a lot of in-game examples from various MMOs, but as I have written the script, I found that would have made this video way too long. So I will just be describing these methods in depth without getting into specific examples. If you'd like to see some specific examples of these methods, join me in the Discord. So getting into it, here are the 9 primary methods I have used to acquire gold in previous MMOs. I have ordered them based on difficulty, with the easier methods near the top. The number 1 method is simply quest rewards and normal gameplay. A lot of games do reward a decent income from just simply playing the game normally. Some have very boring daily quests that sadly can become a near requirement because of the rewards given. Ashes has said they will not be having those types of daily quests, which is good. I do recommend playing through the story and enjoying the game for what it is. The following methods are ways to implement that normal income that you would get from just playing the game normally. This will probably be a viable gold making method in Ashes, as it is in most MMOs, just collecting the gold rewards from everyday activities that you enjoy doing. The number 2 method is a very common one, found in the gold making guides for MMOs, and that is just farming the materials that have a good combination of value, selling volume, and competition. It is not just about farming the areas with the densest spawns, or the materials with the absolute highest value. It can be that, but sometimes there are better alternatives in materials that are not as heavily farmed, or the high value material might be one that takes a while to get sold and is therefore not worth the time. As I have talked about in my previous video, middle tier materials are often overlooked as well. They are not always the best to farm for income, but in some cases they can be. I suspect Ashes will have plenty of profitable materials for gatherers, and the constant destructive nature of the world means many gatherables will always be in demand to some extent. The number 3 method is similar to number 2, and that is simply crafting the in-demand items that give the best return for the cost of the materials to make it. Without question, there will be some items that are constantly in demand. Siege will likely always be in demand. Higher tier gear will often be in demand, especially when people first start getting to in-game. Consumables will probably remain in demand for a long time. As I have said before, I have a hard time envisioning a scenario where crafting is not the best way to become economically dominant long-term in Ashes. But with the recent release of the profession list, some finished items appear to be coming from the processing branch. Animal husbandry, alchemy, and cooking, at least historically, are professions that provide finished items. So this to me is a balance that Intrepid is already trying to do to create more interest for the processing branch of the artisan system, and to me this is a great decision. The number 4 method is processing of time-gated materials. This is something I gave an example of in the previous video, and it is a method that developers put in the game primarily as a way to slow down the progression of players so they don't blow through the content so quickly. It also creates a decent income source for processors and crafters that can make these time-gated items, and they very often have stable profit margins. Ashes has stated that the processing will be the biggest bottleneck in the artisan system, and that time gating will be a thing. So this has definite potential to be a strong gold maker in Ashes. The number 5 method is processing of non-time gated materials that provide the best return. This is just a matter of researching and tracking what materials can be transformed from raw form to process form, providing the best profit margin. It is important to make sure that this is an item that has a decent enough demand, because often the items not in demand will have decent profit margins but take a long time to sell. With the way Intrepid seems to be wanting to make processing matter and be a bottleneck in the artisan system, I suspect shrewd players can find a lot of opportunity with this method. The number 6 method is material tier conversions. Some MMOs have these in place to keep the pricing of material tiers balanced. You can convert a tier 2 material to a tier 3 material, for instance. In most cases, I found this conversion actually loses you money, but in some rare cases this conversion is profitable. As for whether this will be a thing in Ashes, they have not talked at all whether they will have material tier conversions like this, so we will have to wait and see. I tend to think these are a good thing to have in an economy to help keep the economy more stable, as it provides a floor for lower tier material prices and stabilizes the materials market as a whole. The little things like this that game devs do that few even realize have an impact can be a game changer for the economy of a game. The number 7 method is advanced processing and shuffle techniques. So this is just a series of conversions of items that varies depending on the RNG of the conversion. The most notable example of this is the WoW jewel crafting shuffle, where players buy or mine ore and prospect it, which gives a chance to get some gems. Depending on which gems you receive determines what you do next, and the profit was pretty consistent, reliable, and most importantly, once you grasp the concept of it, it did not take that much time. I always like gold making methods that just take a few minutes of time when I first log in or right before I log out for the day. The jewel crafting shuffle was definitely one of those methods that was quick and easy once mastered. With the complexity of the Ashes of Creation artisan system and economy, it would not surprise me if these advanced shuffle techniques exist, but again, we don't know yet. The number 8 method is popular gold crafting and gathering leveling guides contrarianism. So for gold making guides, once these guides get out and become popular, oftentimes they become inferior methods as the market quickly adjusts. So getting ahead of figuring out how the market will adjust can be a way players can stay one step ahead of the guide makers. Areas that are not being focused on by guide makers can often have a better profit margin because of the reduced competition. Gathering, processing, and crafting power leveling guides often have major effects on the market. If a guide lists a certain material that is optimal for leveling, then that material will often lose value with so many people farming it. If a gathering guide lists a certain material that is optimal for leveling gathering, then that material will often lose value with so many people farming it. If a processing guide lists a material that is optimal for processing, then that material will gain value. If a guide lists a processed material or a specific recipe that uses a certain type of material for power leveling a crafting profession, then that material will gain value, but the crafted item will plummet in value. So ideally, if you can look at the most popular guides and find things that do not overlap, that will be optimal. So find a raw material that is popular in a processing guide, but not a material that is used in the popular gathering guides. Then guess what? That material might be a good thing to go out and gather. This is what I mean by guide contrarianism, and I suspect it will exist in some form in Ashes. The number 9 method is auction house flipping. With auction house flipping, I have many different subcategories, which you can see here. So the first auction house flipping category is materials flipping. And with this, I gave an example in the last video with the Guild Wars 2 trading post. As I said in that video, I often have found the best flipping markets in the middle tier of the materials market. Flipping materials is nice because the volume is often high enough that a small profit margin can be repeated very often to add up to big returns in the long run. Many people that flip want to look for high-priced items and get a big return for a single flip. But there is more competition in that, and there's not always opportunity there. I can usually carve out a few flipping niches in the materials markets in most MMOs, and that is where I spend the bulk of my time flipping. It is not usually enough to make you rich, but it can be very nice supplemental income. The more supplemental income streams you can create, the better your financial situation will be in-game, and in real life for that matter. I suspect there will be opportunities for material flipping in Ashes of Creation, if not on the auction house, then maybe a regional arbitrage situation. The second category of flipping is flipping of finished items. Similar to the materials market, rarely do I find the best opportunity in the most popular categories of items. Sometimes the early and mid-tier sets that are popular for lower level characters offer the best profit margins and have less flipping competition. These opportunities will probably be present in Ashes, but this is not an area I tend to spend much time in, as finished items do not usually sell as quickly as raw materials. The third category is seasonal speculation, so buying materials that might be useful for an upcoming seasonal patch and therefore gain value. I said I wouldn't show you examples in this video, but this is one I think warrants an example. In Guild Wars 2, candy corn is created and dumped into the economy during the Halloween seasonal event. It is used for a lot of crafting recipes. It always has the most value right before the event, and the least value when supply ramps up during the event towards the end. So there is an opportunity here for those that are very patient. With this one though, you have to determine if the opportunity cost of keeping the funds invested in this for an entire year is worth it. Ashes will have seasonal events, so this could be a potential way to speculate. The fourth category of auction house flipping is patch speculation. Within this category, there are 3 subcategories. The first is buying materials that are drastically oversupplied and selling for near vendor prices. Devs will often do balancing to make these materials have less supply, or increase the demand, or both. Buying and holding in anticipation of this is a form of speculating that the price will go up due to a patch change. This will most likely be a viable speculation method in Ashes. The second category within patch speculation is watching the actual patch notes to try to get ahead of the curve. So the best way is to track changes on the PTR before they get to the live game. Then you can buy sell items that you think will be affected by the PTR changes in the live game. Be careful though, as devs can throw you curveballs and change up which items, materials they change. And sometimes there are changes that happen that never hit the patch notes. So really finding those opportunities is impossible. It will depend on how verbose Intrepid is with their patches, and if they include things like balance changes to material drop rates in the patch notes. The third category is similar to the second, but in this case the shift in the materials or items market is not due to drop rate changes or changes in the amount of materials needed in recipes. Changes to the build meta, whether it be the meta PvE or PvP builds, can drastically affect the materials markets. This will require a more in-depth knowledge of the crafting markets and knowing what materials are more needed for different types of gear. So, for instance, if strength is a very popular base stat, but due to some changes on the PTR you think dex might overtake strength as the most popular base stat, you can then see which materials and items will be affected by this change and speculate accordingly. This can also be done preemptively. If there are certain classes or builds that are just drastically underperforming, one could speculate that the devs are likely going to buff that class soon and start to speculate on ways to profit from that. Again, this will probably be a viable method of speculation in Ashes. So this ends the patch speculation category and gets us to the final category of auction house flipping, and that is the idea of being able to corner a market. This is risky, as if there is a raw material that is heavily gathered, the market can quickly undercut you, but for those that already have a lot of gold, you can buy out all the materials of a market and relist them higher. I rarely attempt this unless I am really sure I can pull it off, as more times than not I have lost money attempting this, but if you are confident you can make it work, the potential profit is huge. This ends the discussion on ways I have made gold in past MMOs. As I have said throughout, I think many of these methods will also work in Ashes, but we won't know which will be the most viable until we get into the game. And I suspect new categories could open up with the complexity of this MMO. Regional arbitrage is one that I didn't talk about in this video because I have never done that in an MMO before. There are only a few MMOs where that opportunity even exists, such as EVE Online, and I never played that one. And I didn't have enough room to fit my speculation on the best potential methods for Ashes of Creation in this video. For now, I'm going to end this series, as by now I've lost all but just a few hardcore viewers of my channel. But if there is enough interest, I will post a video on what I think could be the best methods. And speculating on what could be the best gold making in Ashes this early is incredibly speculative at this point anyway. But I will at least give a broad overview of what my thoughts are real quick. Long story short, I think the early game could be more focused on maximizing the value of hunting certificates, not transcontinental trading of hunting certificates like I showed in video 1, as in the early game I don't think players will be equipped to run them that far in a reasonable amount of time without too much risk being involved, but instead just intercontinental trade between two different economic regions and going to the highest level nodes to exchange hunting certificates. Set up a loop to run back and forth with caravans and switching up which certificates are being sent so that the prices remain high. Later game, hunting certificates might lose favor to materials trading. It would not surprise me if some materials are only available on certain continents or islands. This would be a way to basically force naval content, as players would have to move these items back and forth. Along with these items, players could also move hunting certificates to get that maximum 5x increase in their value. Alongside that, crafting and player trading will likely be a big gold maker in the late game. I will avoid going any further in depth than that, but I do have a lot more ideas. Join the Discord if you want to talk further. And with that, I will end this one. If you liked the video, consider subscribing, and with that, I will see you in the next one.